Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 10th of December 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you around 15 to 20 minutes of gaming news and comment, give or take. You know, I really need to change that intro because every single episode the length changes for fairly obvious reasons, so I'll come up with something better, I'm sure. In the headlines today, Valve will release its own console-like PC, says Gabe Newell. A little bit of analysis on the Steam box. European Wii U shop restricts 18+ rated content during the daytime. Numbers show, according to analysts, that the Call of Duty franchise is in decline, and SEGA of Japan on mysterious copyright blitz against Shining videos on YouTube. It's been known for a while that there were plans by Valve to produce something called the Steam Box, some kind of hardware, but details were scarce. There was a lot of speculation regarding the idea of a living room PC or indeed a straight-up Valve console, but now in an interview with Kotaku, there has been a significant amount of information given out by Gabe Newell, and he has stated that they are working on the so-called Steam Box, which is a complete hardware and software solution which could compete with the next generation of Sony and Microsoft console hardware. As regards to the details, Newell is quoted as saying our hardware will be a very controlled environment. And the nice thing about PCs is a lot of different people can try out different solutions, and customers can find the ones that work best for them, which is a little bit of a curious contradiction I tend to find. As to what this thing is actually going to run, well, Newell hasn't confirmed what it will be running, but it's very unlikely, of course, that it will be a Windows 8-based solution, considering the heavy criticism that Windows 8 and its Windows Store system have received from Valve, but he hasn't confirmed as to whether or not it will be some kind of Linux-based operating system, although it has to be said that Valve has been moving significantly in the direction of Linux solutions lately, with supposedly Steam's next step being the introduction of Big Picture for Steam on Linux. Big Picture is a system that's only just been released, and it is designed to allow you to utilize Steam on a television using a controller rather than on a PC using a keyboard and mouse. It's a different kind of interface, and that's currently available for everyone right now on Steam just by clicking the Big Picture button in the top right. Well, this is confirmation of what we suspected, the idea that Valve is getting into the console market, I suppose you could call it. The question is it a console market, or is it the notion that they're moving into more of an HTPC kind of role with a bit more power behind it? I mean, Valve is a gaming company, and Steam is, of course, for the most part, 99.5% of the software on there anyway, is gaming software. So obviously, you could refer to this as a console, you could refer to this as a PC, but it looks like they're moving towards this more controlled environment. Now, bear in mind, of course, that Valve doesn't make any money from hardware sales, so this is an opportunity for them to either do that, or, alternatively, to launch a machine at a loss, just like Sony and Microsoft, and in some cases Nintendo, and then make the money back via the cut that they get from Steam. I mean, that's where all their money's coming from, right? The 30% or so that they take from Steam sales. So that's a reasonably large amount, especially when you then add in the factors of Dota 2's monetization, Team Fortress 2's monetization, and any future games they happen to release. So, do they release this as a standalone piece of hardware that is locked into Steam and is sold at a loss, or do they essentially just release a uniform standard PC with certain design innovations that are designed around the idea of using it on your television in an easy manner, which usually means form factor is fairly important. You can't have this huge giant tower in the middle of your living room, especially not if it makes a lot of noise. What about controller support? You're going to have to use this thing from your couch, most likely, so keyboard and mouse is a little bit awkward. There's all sorts of possibilities here, and I'm in two minds as to whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing. The thing which makes me very, very wary is the notion that Valve will create this carefully managed PC ecosystem. Yeah, the idea being that it's tightly controlled. They said the hardware will be a very controlled environment, but that is the hardware. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will be restricting what you can actually put on this thing. When it comes to consoles, of course, everything is extremely limited, but the notion of having a limited PC, at least to me, is abhorrent. To others, though, bearing in mind this machine is clearly not marketed at me, I game in my office. And if I want to play consoles, yeah, I'll play it on the television downstairs, but generally speaking, I'll play high-power games on my high-power machine in my office. That's the best way of doing so. But they are just talking about hardware here. it doesn't necessarily mention that there will be any kind of restriction. I mean, pre-installing the Steam software is a no-brainer, right? But the question is, does Valve allow for other stores to be involved in this? Because historically, consoles have not allowed for that. It's a very, very restrictive ecosystem. And it depends as to whether or not Valve wants to really make a mark in the same way that Apple have with iOS and the App Store. That's also a very restrictive ecosystem. What do they want to do? How do they want to make the money? If they want to make the money by hardware, then this thing has to be more expensive. But surely they want more of these in the home, so they want it to be lower price. It's a really, really awkward thing indeed. The flip side of this, the potential positive aspect, is if this thing takes off, then we see more PC development, right? Because games that will run on this thing are also going to run on a PC, obviously. How could they not? So if we see better ports, if we see more timely ports, if we see more PC-exclusive games coming in as a result of increased PC gaming presence in households, then this is a good thing for PC gaming. One could also say that it's a good thing from a competition standpoint because you finally produce a piece of hardware that is hopefully affordable and easy to use that can directly compete with consoles, ergo Sega, Microsoft, and Nintendo have a fourth competitor in their specific space rather than in this more niche space, and they have to improve their services to compete. Unfortunately, there is also a flip side to that too. Competition is good. However, this could promote even more Steam dominance than what we've got already, which could essentially mean that other digital distribution platforms end up in trouble. They end up shutting down because they can't compete with Steam. And if Steam does become the monopolized digital distribution platform, then all we essentially have is exactly the same thing that is happening with consoles and the App Store, whereby you have no other choice. You must buy it from this one vendor. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is a bad thing. So I have mixed feelings about this thing. I'm not the kind of person that believes that Valve is a company whose sole idea is to do good. They've done bad things in the past, and many people tend to shove them under the rug for whatever reason. There's a lot of bias towards Valve. But I think it's potentially got a lot of positive implications for the PC market, and we're going to have to wait and see as to the specifics of this machine going forward. In a rather bizarre move, the European Nintendo Wii U eShop, that is the worst. They really need to do something about that branding. Yes, the European Nintendo Wii U eShop. God, it sounds like I'm speaking in Swahili. One way or the other, they have restricted 18+ rated content in their online store before 11 PM each day. Now, that sounds reasonable, right? Yeah, absolutely. It stops kids from seeing age-restricted content. That's great. So, as long as I've got my date of birth set to the appropriate thing, this shouldn't affect me in any way, right? Wrong. It's affecting everyone. It's actually ridiculous. Attempting to view trailers and screenshots for 18+ rated games, which admittedly there's not an awful lot of on Nintendo at the moment. The Wii U has Zombie U, and I believe that's almost about it. I think Call of Duty probably qualifies as well in some countries, maybe Assassin's Creed. And what it will say is you cannot view this content. The times during which the content can be viewed have been restricted. This also includes the ability to download 18+ rated content, so it's impossible to download 18+ rated games during the day, which is in itself mind-bogglingly stupid. The only official news we've heard from Nintendo thus far has been from a representative of Nintendo Italy that explained that this restriction between the hours of 11 PM and 3 AM is an additional precaution to make sure that minors cannot access content which is inappropriate for their age. Nintendo has always aimed to offer gameplay experiences suited to all age groups, observing carefully all the relevant regulations regarding content access that are present in the various European countries. This is an interesting thing to say, considering this is the first time I've ever seen anyone do this. This has not occurred in the UK or the EU for any of the other machines, and as you can see, is very much a blanket restriction across the board. Now, I can certainly understand the notion of restricting kids from seeing this kind of stuff. That's cool. But the fact of the matter remains that that is not Nintendo's responsibility. As you can see across all European countries, when it comes to these digital platforms and things like that, the actual laws that companies have to abide by are reasonably lax. Then it's not a case of saying you cannot allow anyone to see 18+ rated content during the day. I mean, the notion is actually absurd. And as a result, you have this awful situation where It's not about parental control. It's not about using the various systems that the consoles have to offer. It is possible to restrict this kind of stuff via a password-protected system that the parents set up in the first place, via basic time restrictions, things like that. But that's the thing. It's about the parents doing that. It's not about Nintendo doing that across the board and then just blanketing everyone with it. I mean, the notion that I can't download a game during the day, for instance, if I was in Europe, thankfully I'm not at this point. If I wanted to purchase and download a game from the eShop, which is, of course, it's going to be a big game. I mean, games are large these days. There's no real question about that. Obviously, you'd have to download this stuff onto a USB hard drive because the storage on the Wii U is lackluster. If I wanted to download something like that, I mean, Assassin's Creed for PC, for instance, is 16 gigabytes. I assume it's probably less for the Wii U because maybe lower texture quality or something like that, but that's still a lot of data. And you're telling me I can't download that unless it's past 11 PM. It's actually madness. It really is. And this has surely got to be dealt with. I can't imagine why Nintendo of Europe thinks this is required. It isn't. The argument being put forward as to this requirement goes down to the fact that Nintendo of Europe is a German company, and German broadcast laws say that 18+ rated content is limited to 11 PM to 3 AM. Now, this, as far as I'm concerned, does not apply to selling digital products. I'm pretty sure it does not. If it did, I'm fairly sure we would have seen it rear its ugly head before now, and quite frankly, we haven't. Nothing like that on Steam, nothing like that on PS3, nothing like that on 360, nothing like that on the App Store, and also, bear this in mind, perhaps the most vital thing, that Germany is not Europe. Germany is Germany. There are a lot of countries in Europe, including, of course, the UK, and all these countries have different laws. Applying the German laws across the board and across the entire region is just bizarre. Not exactly the best of starts from Nintendo if they're looking to sell more digital games, and I'll keep an eye on this as it develops. I have to assume this is a mistake, because the whole thing is just so bizarre and ridiculous, but I will keep an eye on it, and I'll let you know if anything changes going forward. Analysts are claiming that Black Ops 2 is the start of the decline for the Call of Duty franchise, with the latest installment of the game having sold 7.4 million copies across 360 and PlayStation 3 in its launch month. In comparison, Modern Warfare 3 sold 8.8 million copies, and the original Black Ops sold 8 million in its launch month. However, it is worth noting that due to the specific release date, the launch month technically had 7 fewer days in it than previous Call of Duty titles. Now, bearing that in mind, a fellow by the name of Doug Kreutz, who is of Cowen and Company, one of the analysts that came up with these numbers, claimed that they was expecting around 7.9 million units sold across all platforms. However, the numbers for PlayStation 3 and 360, as reported by NPD, were 7.4 million. Now, this kind of follows on to an article that I dealt with a couple of weeks back, I believe, on the subject of NPD and how actually useless its numbers were, because these numbers do not include PC sales, of which there were actually quite a few. Black Ops 2 remains one of the most popular titles on Steam at the moment for concurrent players. It also does not include the sales of Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified on the PlayStation Vita, which is probably about 7 copies, and also Black Ops 2 on the Wii U was not included in these figures. So I would have to say that as much as this is a case of people shouting from the rooftops, oh god, Call of Duty is in decline, well, no, probably not. These numbers don't really tell the whole story, and I feel it's very disingenuous to suggest that they do. As always, NPD numbers are pretty much 360 and PlayStation 3 only, don't include digital download sales and all manner of different things, and considering the increasing number of platforms that these games become available on, including, of course, iOS versions and all sorts of things like that, I feel these numbers are becoming progressively more redundant as we go on. So, as much as you might want to call for the death of Call of Duty, I don't think that's going to be happening just yet. But what is becoming more abundantly clear is that the franchise is not necessarily undergoing a period of growth in 2012. It is entirely possible that it may have plateaued. But we will see next year when Modern Warfare 4 comes out as to just how much truth there really is in that. And finally, it's time to talk about something that is personally affecting me and many, many others indeed. Now, I've held back on this particular story for a while, but I think it's probably about time that we talk about this because it's actually pretty important, and I've had a lot of questions as to why certain videos have been missing from my channel. And this is indeed a valid piece of news that has been reported by a wide variety of different sites, including Eurogamer and Destructoid. So what's been happening is that Sega Japan have gone on this copyright blitz that has involved removing a large number of videos from YouTube containing any reference whatsoever to the old series of Shining games. Shining being I would say it's a multi-genre series, it very much is. It's mostly RPGs, and it depends on as to which games they are, as to what specific genre they have to be. Shining Force is a strategy RPG, Shining in the Darkness, Shining the Holy Ark are more dungeon crawlers, and then Shining Force Neo and Exa are hack-and-slash games. But this series has been running for a very, very long time indeed, and was first released on the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive with Shining in the Darkness. And what's been going on is that videos have been disappearing from YouTube as a result of copyright strikes from someone representing Sega of Japan. Now, what YouTube has is something called the DMCA takedown system, and the DMCA is, of course, a US piece of legislation, and this is designed to keep them specifically safe from being nuked out of existence, right? From just being sued to death. They have something called the Safe Harbor Law. As hosts of the content, they're not actually responsible for the infringement of the users, but as a result, they've got to have this system whereby a copyright holder can take down quickly a piece of content that belongs to them and is being re-uploaded without their permission. Now, what this has opened up is some abuse by various companies, as well as a couple of copyright trolls. The trolls tend to get shut down pretty quickly. That's not really a problem, and everything gets restored nicely. But when a company decides to do this, it becomes a much, much more complicated affair. Now, as to what's happened, I've had 2 videos taken down. They go by the name of Let's Play Shining Force 3, the first battle video, and Battle 12 for no apparent reason. Now, this means I've got a couple of copyright strikes on my account. Now, I'm under no risk of losing my account because the Game Station protects me from such things. But many smaller channels have already been shut down as a result of this. And these are channels that didn't even monetize their videos. Some of you are already coming out of the woodwork and saying, well, it's your fault for trying to make money from someone else's work. And well, actually, you're allowed to do that in certain circumstances. Like, for instance, the Game Station has a lot of different licenses with various different publishers. I personally have permission from a lot of different publishers. I've done Sega games in the past. They have sent them to me in order to actually receive WTF treatment. You're also protected under US Fair Use Doctrine, which allows for certain things like commentary, satire, parody, documentary, educational stuff, and whether or not you make money out of it is a factor, but it's not the sole deciding thing. It's not a case of, oh, as long as it's not monetized, it's okay, and also not a case of, oh, it's monetized, therefore it's not okay. It's a little bit more complicated than that. That's the reason why lawyers get paid a lot of money, right? Especially in copyright. You also have to take a common sense approach to it. I mean, it's a 15-year-old game. Shining Force 3 was released on the Sega Saturn. The Sega Saturn's been dead for a very long time indeed. There's no way to legitimately purchase this game outside of the second-hand market, so you can't give money to the devs. It just can't be done, or to the publishers either. And there are no plans, as far as we know, to re-release this series in any form on modern systems. So this in itself seems absurd. I mean, the very notion that a publisher can just go around flat out destroying channels via the use of this system is incredibly abusive, but it even goes deeper than that, because people have had their channels shut down merely for talking about the Shining series. We're talking about people that did vlogs for the Save Our Shining Force campaign, which merely involved them being on webcam talking about Shining Force. There is no way you can claim that for infringement, and it is flat out illegal to do so. As you might imagine, the notion that anything critical could be taken down via copyright is a massive freedom of speech issue. There's a reason why the DMCA specifically prohibits that, and of course why there are rights in almost every country to protect you from this kind of stuff, because it would essentially amount to corporate censorship, and that could be used against criticism, it could be used against reviews, it would screw everything over. Now, what makes this thing even more sinister is the speculation that there is a possibility that Sega has taken these videos down in order to improve search engine optimization for their new title, Shining Ark. Now, there is no proof of this as of yet, and I should very much state and remind you that this is speculation, but it certainly does make a degree of logical sense, much more logical sense than anything else. So far, more than 16 channels have been affected, including mine, and it's now gotten to the point where I have to make a public statement on this matter, because Sega must do something about this. Sega of Japan have been notorious for their lack of cooperation and contact with people outside of Japan, but Sega EU and Sega US must realize just how damaging this actually is to their reputation. The notion that you are destroying fan-based channels and that you are taking down legitimate criticism, legitimate commentary, work that's being created around your games is seriously harmful to your public image, as well as being, in some cases, as I said, downright illegal. As a result of this, I've taken down not only my Shining Force series, which is unfortunate because I am really proud of that series. That was a series I did a long time ago as an amateur, and I thought it was really, really good. I've also placed a boycott on all Sega-related coverage on this channel until this issue is amicably resolved. Now, you might think, oh, that's fine, Sega doesn't make any games anymore. Sega publishes a lot of games. Like, a couple of recent examples of Sega games that I've covered on this channel: Hell Yeah, Wrath of the Dead Rabbit, Jet Set Radio HD. I was also going to be covering Knights HD, and in the past I've done stuff like Sonic Generations and Binary Domain. Binary Domain is a game that they published. Not only that, but they also published the Total War series, so any possibility of covering the forthcoming Rome 2 Total War has gone completely out of the window as a result of this action. This is, I feel, the best way that I can actually get a message through to Sega to say that this censorship, this abuse of the DMCA system, is thoroughly and completely unacceptable. This channel has been a strong supporter of Sega for the most part, and more importantly, videos going out on new Sega games have, generally speaking, been the most viewed on the entirety of YouTube. Stuff like Hell Yeah, stuff like Jet Set Radio HD, and even Sonic Generations. These were videos that were getting massive numbers of views and were more popular as a form of critique, and indeed, indirectly, as a result, a form of promotion for Sega than anything else on YouTube. So the removal of this is damaging to the company. Not covering titles like Total War is damaging to the company, and they must resolve this immediately before more channels get shut down by this berserk blitzkrieg from Sega Japan. And more to the point, it must not be allowed to continue, because if this sets a precedent and allows companies to do this en masse, then we as gaming channels, and just we as gamers in general that want to see unbiased critique as well as commentaries and even historical videos based on old titles, we're gonna be in a hell of a lot of trouble. This has got to stop now. Ladies and gentlemen, my name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, and I will see you next time.